Welcome to Stuck Time to Improv. I'm Mary Scott with Business Riff, and I want startup businesses to be wildly successful. I'm very happy today to have Dr. Jo Gorman, who is an investor and an advisor and just a fabulous person who really knows what startups need. So welcome, Mary Jo.
Thank you very much for having me, Mary.
So one of the things you were talking about is advisory boards. What can startups do with an advisory board?
So one of the things I notice when I talk to various entrepreneurs, and by the way, I'm an entrepreneur myself, so I feel like I've seen this from both sides of the desk, so to speak. And I know that I've made the same, I'll call it mistake maybe as an entrepreneur. You're trying to solve a problem in the business and you start sitting at your desk thinking about it, or maybe you have a co-founder you run it by, and maybe you ask a few other people, but you are struggling to solve something strategic or something else in your business, and often I'll say, including me, have done this, will not get enough perspective from enough other people. And that leads, I think, to less good decisions than if you had other perspectives.
Okay. So what would be the best configuration of an advisory board? Who should be on such a board?
So some people sometimes get confused about the difference between an advisory board and a fiduciary board. So an obvious example is a public company has a board that has fiduciary responsibilities, make sure that there's no fraud in the company and that all the results they're putting out are accurate and have been audited. That's not that usual in a small entrepreneurial early stage company. It starts to happen when you have institutional investors, but before that, there's a lot of value in having a board that's an advisory board. So they don't have responsibility for if you're cheating or something like that, but their responsibility is to help you strategically. And so often my recommendation is that you might have three people in addition to the entrepreneur. And when I say the entrepreneur, it could be the CEO and their co-founder, or whoever the key people are, typically not the whole management team. So the CEO and the advisory board, if there's a co-founder like a COO or president or CTO, that's fine for them to be included too. And so 3 to 5 is more than enough. You're not trying to get 20 people's opinions on things. And so that's the first thing, is size. The next thing I would look at is, what are the expertises for those people that you're asking to be part of this conversation? Sometimes people will say, well, I'm not a lawyer, I should get a lawyer, or I'm not an accountant. This is not really the time for those kind of professional people to be on your board. You're looking for people who have information in your industry. So for instance, I'm a healthcare person and I don't really know that much about consumer products. So asking me to be on the advisory board of somebody who's in consumer products would really be a waste of that entrepreneur's time. I might be able to have some general thoughts, but they're go to market strategy meetings or in-depth spending on marketing meetings. I'm really not going to be of any use. So you want people who know your industry as specifically as possible. But as sort of a side comment, people tend to think about whatever they're doing as extremely unique. But if they step back, they will find it's part of a broader offering that's fairly common in the, around the world or in the industry or in the US, wherever you are. And so you want people who know that broader industry and preferably have had success in the industry or have seen enough things in the industry that they can say, oh, I saw this, or I know somebody who's seen this, and they can really have good brainstorming conversations with the entrepreneur.
Okay. So, for example, if someone's got a brand new business and they're setting up a new sort of unique dating app, it might be good to have someone who understands how to develop apps generally, as well as someone who maybe has some experience in marketing, dating, or social apps.
Correct. That's exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
And
And some
people
of
who
that
have,
depends on, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
people who have skill sets that are different from the skill sets that the entrepreneur has.
That's
You
right.
can't do it all. That's one of the big mistakes. Entrepreneurs try to do it all themselves. And no,
Right.
you need to have those complementary skill sets to
Yep.
really help you grow and prosper.
That's exactly right.
So how often would an advisory board meet?
So it depends on the entrepreneur and it depends on the advisory board. And it depends really on what's happening at the company. So if you're an early stage company, there's always something happening, right? And so maybe, once a month might be a little bit much. And I'll come to, do you pay these people and that sort of thing? But certainly every other month. Once a quarter is not enough. And so every other month. And if people will agree, nothing wrong with having a meeting every month. The reason they believe, part of the reason they believe that having an advisory board improves the success of the entrepreneur and the company is because it forces everybody to stop and think about what you're doing, right? Particularly the entrepreneur, because in the early stages of any company, an early stage could be up to, $40 million or 50 million even. And every company's always having changes and things like that. It changes and being buffeted by different things in the environment. So it forces the entrepreneur to stop and say, here's what we're working on. Not that I'm coding all day long, or not that I'm out in sales meetings all day long. Here's where the company's going. Here's what we're thinking about now. And then forces them to have that in some sort of a presentation form for other people, and then be able to have a good conversation around that. If you as an entrepreneur are just like won't take the time or the effort, you're not going to get anything out of this. It requires discipline on the part of the entrepreneur to do this. But if they have that discipline, they will get a lot out of this. So I would say ideally probably once a month. But if you can't get everybody to agree to that, maybe every other month.
Okay. And set an agenda with probably no more than 5 items.
Yes,
So it's a
correct.
good way to learn to get yourself to set priorities, to solve problems without just beating your head against a wall, and to actually make people feel valuable because you're asking them for information that they have to help you rather
That's
than
right.
just spinning your wheels and or talking about how far you've come so far.
Right, right. Well, and I think that's a great point, Mary. And particularly those items on the list should be strategic decision items. They should not be um, minor items. Sometimes strategy and operations kind of can overlap in some ways, but they should be strategic things that you want to talk about, whether it's the direction of the product, the direction of marketing, location situations. Maybe it's a really key hire. Should you make it or not make it? What are the pros and cons? So you want it to be at a high level, because the folks that you have around the table, they're not operational experts. They don't need to make decisions that are really in the weeds. You need a higher level input on strategy.
Well, this has been really useful information, and startups can use an advisory board. And if they follow the suggestions here, you're going to have much more capabilities for success. Thank you so much, Mary Jo Gorman. This is Mary Scott with Business Riff. I want startups to be wildly successful, so book a strategy call with me at businessriff.com. And join us again for Stuck Time to Improv.